The xenological explorer drifted through the void between worlds, its massive hull carrying the hopes and fears of interstellar research. Inside the ship's sterile corridors, Cadet Tarlin adjusted his uniform nervously, still feeling like an imposter among the seasoned crew members. At 22, he was the youngest member of the xenobiology research team, fresh from the academy, and eager to prove himself worthy of his position aboard one of the galaxy's most prestigious research vessels. The explorer specialized in collecting and studying extinct species from dead worlds' planets where civilizations had fallen centuries ago, but where remarkable creatures had somehow survived in stasis or hibernation. Today's mission involved transferring a particularly dangerous specimen from the cargo hold to the main laboratory for detailed analysis. "Remember, Cadet?" Dr. Calith said as they approached the containment unit, her weathered face showing the wisdom of decades spent studying alien life forms. "This creature comes from Zephyros 4, a world that died in nuclear winter 300 years ago. The few survivors we found have developed extraordinary adaptive mechanisms." Lieutenant Thorin, the security chief, stood at attention nearby, his hand resting on his plasma rifle. "The bioscanners indicate it's still in deep hibernation, but we take no chances. One wrong move and we could have a serious situation on our hands." Tarlin nodded, wiping sweat from his palms as he approached the control panel for the specimen transfer. The creature inside the containment pod was magnificent and terrifying. Nearly 3 meters long with sleek muscular legs, built for incredible speed. Its entire body was covered in adaptive armor plating that seemed to shift color subtly even in stasis. 6 elongated limbs ended in razor-sharp claws, and its triangular head housed rows of serrated teeth, visible even through its closed jaw. Most unsettling were the sensor organs clustered around what appeared to be its nose. Biological instruments capable of detecting the slightest chemical changes in its environment. "According to our preliminary studies," Dr. Calith continued consulting her tablet, "this species, which we've designated Apex mortiferum, was the top predator on Zephyros 4 before the catastrophe. They hunted in packs and possessed remarkable intelligence. The few specimens we've recovered show signs of tool use and complex social behavior." Tarlan's hands moved carefully over the transfer controls. The process was straightforward in theory. Maintain the stasis field while moving the creature from the cargo hold's heavy containment to the laboratory's more sophisticated research pod. But theory and practice were often worlds apart, especially when dealing with alien biology. "Initiating primary transfer sequence," Tarlan announced, his voice steadier than he felt. The machinery hummed to life, and the containment pod began its slow journey along the transport rail. Everything happened so quickly that later Tarlan would struggle to remember the exact sequence of events. A micrometeor, no larger than a grain of sand, struck the explorer's hull at precisely that moment. The ship's deflectors caught it, but the tiny vibration was enough to throw off Tarlan's concentration. His hand slipped on the control panel, accidentally engaging the emergency brake, while the stasis field was cycling between power sources. The containment pod lurched violently. Tarlan instinctively reached out to steady it, but the sharp edge of the control console caught his wrist, slicing through his uniform and opening a gash that immediately began to bleed. 3 drops of human blood fell onto the deck plates below, less than a meter from the containment pod. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the creature's eyes snapped open. Even through the containment field, everyone in the room could see the immediate change. The Apex's nostrils flared wide, and those specialized sensor organs around its snout began to pulse with a faint bioluminescent glow. Its entire body tensed, muscles rippling beneath its adaptive armor. "Get back!" Lieutenant Thorin ordered, raising his weapon. "It's alert." Dr. Calith's scanner beeped frantically. "I'm reading massive neurological activity. It's not just awake, it's analyzing. Those chemoreceptors are incredibly sensitive." The creature's head turned slowly, deliberately, until its predatory gaze fixed directly on Tarlan. Even through the containment field, the cadet felt like prey, being marked by a hunter. The apex's pupils dilated, and what might have been a low growl vibrated through the lab, despite the supposed soundproofing of the containment system. "It smells the blood," Dr. Caleth whispered, her scientific curiosity warring with growing alarm. "The blood contains chemical signatures unique to each individual. It's memorizing Tarlin's scent." The creature began to move. Despite being confined, it prowled the perimeter of its containment pod with fluid grace, never taking its eyes off Tarlon. Its movements were hypnotically precise, each step calculated for maximum efficiency. This wasn't the random motion of a confused or panicked animal. This was a predator assessing its prey and planning an attack. "Can the containment field hold it?" Thorin asked, his finger hovering over his weapon's trigger. "Theoretically, yes," Dr. Caleth replied, though her voice carried uncertainty. "But we've never seen one this active before. The energy readings are extraordinary." As if responding to her words, the apex suddenly struck the containment field with one clawed appendage. The barrier flared blue-white, and warning alarms began to sound throughout the lab. The creature immediately pulled back, studying the field's reaction with obvious intelligence. "It's learning," Tarlin breathed, fascination overcoming his fear. "It's testing the containment's responses." The apex tried again, this time with a different approach. Instead of striking directly, it traced one claw along the field's edge, feeling for weaknesses. When that proved fruitless, it settled back on its haunches and simply stared at Tarlon, motionless as a statue. Hours passed. The research team took shifts monitoring the creature, but its behavior remained eerily consistent. It would move only when Tarlin was in the room, tracking his every step with those intelligent eyes. When others approached the containment pod, it showed minimal interest. But whenever Tarlin came near, the creature became alert, focused, predatory. "It's marked you," Dr. Caleth explained during one of their briefings. "On Zephyros 4, Apex mortiferum, hunted by scent. Once they locked onto a target's chemical signature, they could track it across continents. You've become its prey." "But it's contained," Tarlon protested. "Even if it wanted to hunt me, it can't." Lieutenant Thorin's expression was grim. "These containment systems aren't perfect. We've had breaches before with less dangerous specimens. And this creature is clearly more intelligent than anything we've dealt with." The tension aboard the Explorer grew palpable over the following days. The apex continued its vigil, never sleeping, never eating, just watching. Tarlin found himself unable to focus on his other duties, constantly aware that somewhere on the ship, a perfect killing machine was studying him like a scientist studying a specimen. The breakthrough, when it came, was entirely unexpected. Dr. Caleth was running her daily scans of the creature when she noticed something unusual. "These neural patterns are fascinating," she muttered, adjusting her equipment. "It's not just thinking about hunting. There's complex strategic planning happening in that brain." She'd inadvertently activated the lab's high-frequency scanner, a device designed to penetrate deep into alien tissue. The beam was harmless to most Earth creatures, but on the apex, it had an immediate and dramatic effect. The creature convulsed once violently, then collapsed onto the floor of its containment pod. Its limbs went limp, its eyes closed, and all signs of life appeared to cease. "What did you do?" Thorin demanded, rushing forward with his weapon drawn. "Nothing that should have harmed it," Dr. Caleth replied, frantically checking her readings. "The scanner operates on frequencies completely safe for known biological systems." They watched for several minutes. The apex lay perfectly still, showing no signs of breathing or movement. The containment pod's life sensors flickered uncertainly, unable to get clear readings through the creature's adaptive armor. "Is it dead?" Tarlin asked, feeling a strange mix of relief and disappointment. Dr. Caleth frowned at her instruments. "I'm not getting consistent readings. Its biology is so different from anything we've encountered that our sensors might not be calibrated properly." Lieutenant Thorin kept his weapon trained on the motionless form. It could be faking. The suggestion seemed absurd at first. What animal would have the intelligence or self-control to feign death so convincingly? But as the hours passed and the creature remained motionless, doubts began to creep in. Look at the positioning. Dr. Caleth observed, studying video playback of the moment the apex collapsed. Most animals, when they die, suddenly fall in awkward positions, but look at how it's lying. Limbs perfectly arranged, head positioned to protect vital organs. It's like it chose how to fall. Tarlin studied the footage with growing excitement. What if it's not just intelligent enough to hunt? What if it's intelligent enough to strategize, to recognize when direct confrontation isn't the optimal approach? The implication was staggering. They weren't dealing with just a perfect predator. They were dealing with a perfect strategist. Testing this theory proved challenging. How do you test whether something is truly dead without potentially triggering it if it's alive? Dr. Caleth tried passive scan sound stimulation, even introducing scents that should have provoked a response. Nothing worked. The breakthrough came from Tarlin himself. Remembering his studies of Earth animals, he suggested they try something counterintuitive: remove the containment field entirely. Absolutely not, Lieutenant Thorin objected immediately. If that thing is alive and we drop the field, it'll kill us all. But think about it, Tarlin argued. If it's really playing dead, it's doing so to avoid confrontation. Aggressive stimuli haven't worked because they confirm that it's in a combat situation. But if we signal that we're no longer viewing it as a threat? Dr. Caleth was intrigued. You're suggesting it's maintaining the deception because it perceives us as maintaining an aggressive stance. After heated debate and extensive safety precautions, they decided to test Tarlin's hypothesis. Additional security teams were stationed nearby, emergency containment protocols were activated, and Dr. Caleth prepared a fast-acting sedative gas. Tarlin, against all protests, insisted on being the one to deactivate the containment field. It marked me specifically, he reasoned. If it's going to respond to anyone, it'll be me. The moment the field deactivated, everyone held their breath. The apex remained motionless for nearly a full minute. Then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, one of its eyes opened. The creature's gaze fixed immediately on Tarlin, who forced himself to remain perfectly still. Very gradually, the apex raised its head, studying the situation carefully. Its movements were cautious, almost hesitant, completely unlike the aggressive posturing it had displayed earlier. It's not attacking, Dr. Caleth whispered. Why isn't it attacking? The answer became clear as they observed the creature's behavior over the following hours. The apex had indeed been feigning death, but not as a prelude to attack. It had been employing a defensive strategy, recognizing that direct confrontation in its confined situation would be disadvantageous. Now, with the immediate barrier removed, it was reassessing the situation. The creature moved slowly around its opened containment pod, never making sudden movements, never showing aggressive postures. When security personnel shifted nervously, the apex would freeze until they settled. Most remarkably, when Tarlin slowly extended his hand toward the creature, it didn't attack. Instead, it approached cautiously, and after a moment's hesitation, allowed Tarlin to touch its armored hide. The texture was unlike anything he'd ever felt. Warm, almost silky, despite its armored appearance, with a faint vibration that might have been a form of purring. Incredible, Dr. Caleth breathed. It's showing trust behaviors. In its natural environment, this species probably had complex social interactions, not just predatory ones. Over the following weeks, a unique relationship developed between Tarlin and the apex. The creature, which they'd begun calling Shadow for its habit of following Tarlin around the ship, displayed intelligence that challenged every assumption about alien predators. Shadow learned to navigate the ship's corridors without damaging equipment, showed curiosity about human technology, and even seemed to understand basic human gestures and commands. Most importantly, it never showed any aggression toward crew members, despite having ample opportunity for attack. It's teaching us that survival isn't always about being the strongest or most aggressive. Tarlin explained to Dr. Calith as they watched Shadow interact with the ship's main computer interface. Sometimes it's about being smart enough to know when not to fight. The implications for xenobiology were profound. Shadow wasn't just a surviving specimen from a dead world. It was a complex individual with its own personality capable of forming relationships across species barriers. Its initial reaction to Tarlon's blood hadn't been pure predation, but rather the recognition of a potential rival or threat, followed by a calculated decision to avoid conflict. As the Explorer continued its journey through space, Shadow became an unofficial member of the crew. It attended research briefings, explored the ship's various sections, and formed bonds with several crew members beyond Tarlon. The creature that had once seemed like the ultimate alien threat had become a bridge between species. Lieutenant Thorin, initially the most skeptical about Shadow's peaceful intentions, admitted he'd grown fond of the creature. "It's like having a very intelligent, very dangerous dog aboard," he said. "One that could kill us all but chooses not to." The story of Shadow's death and resurrection spread throughout the scientific community, challenging long-held beliefs about alien intelligence and behavior. The creature's strategic thinking and social adaptability suggested that complex cognition might be more common in the universe than previously believed. Dr. Calith published several papers on their findings, proposing new protocols for first contact with potentially intelligent species. "We must enter every encounter prepared for the possibility that we're not just studying animals," she wrote, "but meeting potential colleagues in the greatest adventure of all, understanding the universe." As for Tarlin, his experience with Shadow transformed him from a nervous cadet into a confident xenobiologist. He'd learned that the universe was full of surprises, that intelligence took forms beyond human imagination, and that sometimes the most valuable discoveries came not from conflict, but from understanding. The apex that had sniffed his blood and played dead to avoid combat had taught him the most important lesson of all, that in the vast cosmos, cooperation and respect could bridge any gap between species, no matter how different they might appear. Shadow never returned to the dead world of Zephyros 4. Instead, it chose to remain aboard the Explorer, continuing to serve as humanity's first ambassador to its species, and opening doors to communication with other intelligent alien life forms they would encounter in their continuing mission of discovery. The relationship between Tarlin and Shadow became a model for interspecies cooperation, proving that even the most fearsome predators could become the most trusted allies when approached with respect and understanding. In the end, the creature that had once seemed like death incarnate had become a living symbol of hope for peaceful coexistence among the stars. Years later, as Captain Tarlon commanded his own research vessel, with Shadow still at his side, he would often reflect on that moment, when a few drops of blood had changed everything. The apex predator that could have killed him had instead chosen to teach him about the power of intelligence over instinct strategy, over strength and cooperation, over conflict. In the vast theater of space where countless species struggled for survival, Shadow had shown that the greatest predators were those who knew when not to hunt at all,